Good morning, everyone. In the last session, we discussed about this particular static related information. After this static information, we move on to this particular nested classes. Something like we created the outer class. Along with this particular outer class, we identified the how we can define the inner classes and nested classes here. Okay. So today we are going to discuss on one of the another important concept called Vararg. So Vararg basically how this particular Vararg is going to provide the information here. So for example, this is the important we are going to call getting the one Vararg. And this particular concept is introduced from the 1.5 onwards here. So inside this particular Vararg concept here, what we will do, we are going to provide the variables to this particular method. For example, I'm having test method. I'm having test method. So I define the two parameters, int comma double. Getting the point. I define the two parameters, but in real time, like in case after defining this particular method, now I want to provide one more parameter. This particular method I come up with the two parameters. So after using this method, in some cases, getting the point. So some object information I'm trying to call this particular method. So in this case, I want to provide the additional method. But here, once we define this particular method, we cannot provide the one more parameter. For example, I want to provide the additional parameter as a int here. So basically, what happens internally, whenever you are trying to provide the additional parameters, for example, this test method is called multiple locations. So this particular test method is called from 10 locations here. Okay. Now, what you need to understand here, whenever you're calling this particular method from the 10 location, whenever you're updating to the additional method, so we need to update in the 10 locations here. We need to update this method into the 10 location. Now, what happens basically, whenever we are trying to update this 10 locations here, we are trying to remodifying the code. Okay. So this is the 10 location is fine. For example, if this method is used in the 100 locations, this particular method we are able to call from the 100 location. Whenever we are calling this particular method from the 100 location, what happens internally? We need to modify 100 locations here. So it's not a good way to identify and modifying the method parameter. But instead of doing this, now what we will do, we are going to write one of the important concept called Vararg here. So basically, Vararg method, what it will do, based on our requirement, it will try to provide the parameter. So there is no restrictions here. You can provide the 1 parameter, or you can provide the 10 parameter, or you can provide the 100 parameters. Okay. Based on our requirement, you can provide the parameters here. So this particular concept is going to handle by the Vararg concept here. Getting the point. So this is very important information we need to understand here. Okay. So let's have a simple example here. So we'll try to identify this Vararg, how it is going to work, and some additional method. For example, I'm going to write the validate method. Validate method, what it's taking, username, password, getting the point, and something like a file name, and some protocol information, getting the point. So, and if we are having any database related connection, some additional parameter. But if you see, these are all the parameters we are going to pass. But in case if I want to add a parameter, we cannot add. Okay, we cannot add because this method, whenever we are trying to defining this method, we are going to provide the how many parameters we are going to pass to this particular validate method. Okay, so again, this is also one of the static problem because in our case, based on our requirement, we are not able to pass the parameters here. Okay, so we'll see using this particular Vararg concept how we can pass the parameter dynamically. For this purpose, I'm going to create a one class here, and this particular class basically first we'll see without this particular Vararg concept here, and what are all the parameters we can pass, and with Vararg concept here, how we can pass the parameters here. Okay, and what is the name of the class I'm going to take as a pass array. Getting the pen. Now observe carefully. I'm trying to take name of the file as a pass array, and the file name is also internally class name. Okay, so this is we define here. I'm trying to use static void VA test method. Okay, the VA test method basically it is expecting array type here. Getting the pen. The VA test method is expecting the parameter array type. Now here, whenever we are defining this particular array type here, now what we can do, we can provide how many parameters we want to pass here. Okay, so observe carefully. I'm defining this particular method. So print method, and here number of args here. So number of arg is nothing but number of elements which are we are having inside this particular array here. So that we discussed in the last session. V dot length. Length is a variable. It will try to provide the how many elements are available inside this particular array. Okay. So this is we provided. And after this, now what I'm doing here, I'm going to provide the content here. Getting the point. So this is the print statement we are going to print. And after this, now what I'm doing here, I'm going to use a Vararg concept here. So this is the for each method. Using this particular for each method, we are going to repeat the elements here. So now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to take the data type as a int, and the ITR variable I'm trying to take as a x, and v is a collection of values here. V is a collection of values. Now what you need to understand here. So here basically here what I'm doing is I'm going to print. So print here and x value I'm trying to print. And after this, now what I will do, so just for understanding, I'm trying to print next line empty. Okay, so this is we need to understand very carefully. So this is the VA test method we define. And after this, now what I'm doing is I'm trying to enable this particular main method. So observe carefully what I'm doing here. So this is important. Here I'm trying to create a array of values. The first one n1 I'm trying to take. Here only one value I'm trying to provide. So into n2 I'm trying to take here. This n2 will contain the something like okay, some values here. So I don't know how many values I given. Around 10 values we given. And n3, now what I'm doing here, I'm passing empty. Okay, so n3 I'm trying to pass as a empty here. So basically what you need to understand here, what you need to understand basically here, these are all the three objects, like three array objects I created, and I'm going to call VA test method. And the VA test method basically I'm trying to pass as a n1 and n2, n3. So these are all the three methods. Okay, now observe carefully. VA test n1 I'm passing, VA test n2 I'm passing, and n3 I'm passing. Now you can see if I'm going to run this example, number of arguments we are having 1, the whatever the content we are having, this is the 10 here, and later I'm trying to print this. Okay, so this is we need to understand this particular values. So here we are having 0, we are not printing any content. Now how many times I'm calling this method? How many times I'm calling? 3 times we are calling this particular method. Each time we are having the different values. Now you can see because of this particular array, what happening internally, we can pass like multiple values. We can pass multiple values here. Getting the point?
नहीं एकदम क्वेश्चन उसे छोटा करो थोड़ा समझे.
Okay, so what we need to understand, first time we are passing 10 value, like the length will be 1. Okay, second time we are passing around 8. Okay, the length we are passing as a 8 and the third term 0. So we don't have any records here. So this is, we are able to understand with the help of this particular array type here. Okay, now what I am doing here, I'm trying to modify this. I'm trying to modify the same information to the Varargs concept, because here we are trying to create a 3 array types here, and the 3 array types I'm passing here. The 3 array types I'm passing here. But this is, instead of using this particular array type, now what I will do, I'm going to use our Varargs concept. So Varargs concept basically, so this is a way of writing this particular Varargs concept here. Getting the point? This is important here. Now if you observe carefully, into 3 dots we need to provide. After the 3 dots, you can provide the name of the variable here. So why I want to use this particular v? V basically, it will try to hold the values here. All the values we are going to hold inside this particular v. And here, this is the data type. And the 3, what is referring here? This particular 3 dots are referring Varargs concept. So Varargs concept basically what it will do? Directly we can provide the values. Directly we can provide the values. So observe carefully. Now what I am doing here, instead of this particular n1, I am passing method value first parameter as a 10, and now you can see the second parameter I am trying to provide multiple values. Getting the point? So this is the way we can provide how many parameters we want to pass. So the third method I am not passing any values. Third method, I'm not passing any value. So observe, see the differences here. Whenever we are trying to pass as an array type here, we are creating an array and we are storing the multiple values, and later we are adding the same array reference to the method parameter. But right now, what we are doing is directly we are passing the values. So this is, so earlier if you observe carefully, the box example, it will give you the more understanding. Now if you see, now we can understand here, these are all the constructor we passed here. And earlier, set values method. The set values method, how many parameters we are passing here? Only 3 values. 3 values we are passing. For example, if I'm going to enable this method, if I'm trying to pass 4 parameter, okay? If I'm trying to pass this particular 4 parameter, what happening internally? We are getting an error. We are getting an error. Getting the point? So why we are getting an error? This method is defined as only 3 parameters it will allow. If you are trying to pass 4th parameter, it is not going to take. Okay. Now, if I want to take this particular 4th parameter, what I need to do? I need to add one more parameter to this particular set values method. Okay. But observe carefully. This example, what we are doing is, we come up with a Varargs concept here. Based on our requirement, we are passing first parameter, and here we are trying to modify multiple values here. We are passing multiple values, and here we are not passing anything. Getting the point? Now, anywhere we are trying to modify the code? No, we are not modifying any code here. Just we are declaring this Varargs concept here, and we are trying to pass how many values we are interested here. Okay, you can pass any number of values. There is no restrictions here. So 1 to 100 you are interested to pass, you can pass. So more than 100 we are not going to pass any method parameter. So that is not a sufficient way of passing the parameter. Okay, but I'm explaining this. So there is no restrictions here. We can pass any number of values. So for example, if I'm going to save this example, if I'm running this, now you can see first one it is having the length and the content we are passing, and the second one again we are having 8, and these are all the values we are printing. So third one is 0, the content we are not printing anything here. Now what you understand here? So whenever we are using this particular Varargs concept here, based on our requirement, we can pass the parameters. Getting the point? This is important here. So whatever the requirement we are going to have in future, if the requirement maybe it is increase or it may be decrease here. So if you are interested, you can pass here. So if it is increased something like up to 4 parameters, something like 4 parameters. Now Any error we are going to get here? We are not going to get any errors here. So directly we can run this example. Now you can see the number of arguments we are having for, these are all the contents we are having. Okay, so this is very important example we are discussing here. Any questions?
పాస్ అరే ఎందుకు యూజ్ చేస్తారు సార్?
అర్థం కాలేదు.
పాస్ అరే ఎందుకు యూజ్ చేస్తారు?
ఇది క్లాస్ నేమ్ బేసికలీ. ఎందుకు డిఫైన్ చేశానంటే ఎర్లియర్ మనం ఇక్కడ అరేస్ రిలేటెడ్గా ఎగ్జాంపుల్ డిఫైన్ చేశాం కాబట్టి ఐడెంటిఫికేషన్ కోసం నేను పాస్ అరే అనే ఒక క్లాస్ తీసుకున్నాను. సో పాస్ అరే బదులు ఇప్పుడు నువ్వు ఇక్కడ మాడిఫై కూడా చేసుకోవచ్చు. రీఫాక్టర్, రీనేమ్, ఇక్కడ Varargs అని కూడా డిఫైన్ చేయొచ్చు. ఓకే, సో Varargs అంటే ఇప్పుడు మనం ఏదైతే డిస్కస్ చేసామో నౌ ఇట్ ఈస్ రిఫరింగ్ టు ద సేమ్.
Sir, in real-time example also we are using Vararg concept.
Yes, we are using.
Is there any example?
So real time basically if you are going to pass a object type, for example, if you are going to pass same type like a person object information, if you want to pass the same object, it contains the multiple parameters and we are going to pass the multiple object information, and those objects we can save or we can update or we can delete this example. So otherwise if you are trying to provide the same multiple object information like this, now based on each object information, maybe based on the certain conditions we can do some other operations.
It means we are not using for only arrays, we are using for all the objects and string also.
Yes, so this is the simple example I define is int. If you are not interested, you can define any custom objects also.
Okay.
Okay, so any other questions?
No sir.
Okay, so observe carefully. Here I'm going to define one more parameter. Now this parameter I'm trying to make as a string here, something like a message I'm trying to provide, and here after this particular message I'm going to make as a this Vararg concept here, and here you can see these three methods are getting an error. Why it is getting an error? Because so this is interrelated information we provided, but this particular method is expecting the first parameter should be string here. Getting the point? Now what I'm trying to do here, I'm going to provide the first parameter. So how I'm trying to provide this particular first parameter? Something like okay, 4 parameters. So the error is resolved here. Same way here also we need to define here. Same way here also we need to define. So how many we are having? Okay, for simple understanding I'm trying to write here, and this is one empty. Okay, now you can see, so instead of printing this particular number of arguments here, what I will do, I'm going to provide as a message here. I'm going to provide message, along with the message I'm going to run the particular content here. Now you can see 4 parameters we are having, so 8 parameters and empty. Getting the point? So this is the way of writing the parameters here. But here this, if I'm going to write the method, whatever the string we defined here at the end. Okay, now you can see we are getting an error here. Getting the point? At method parameter level we are having some compilation error. Why we are getting an error here? This is important here. Okay, so we cannot define the Vararg concept at first here. If you are defining the Vararg concept as a first, you are not going to write some additional parameters here. Okay, so this is not the efficient way to write. Basically, if you define the Vararg parameter as a first here, we are not going to write some additional method parameter, okay, after the Vararg. So if you are trying to write any methods, any parameters, like if I'm trying to write any additional parameters, not only this particular string, So you can add one more int also. You can add one more int also. It will accepting this. But only the problem here, whatever the vararg we are having, the every time vararg should be the last parameter, not the first parameter. If you are trying to define the first parameter, you cannot to define the some additional parameters here. Okay, this is the syntax we need to follow here. Now you can see what I'm doing here. I'm trying to define the first parameter as a string, and the second parameter I'm trying to define as a value, and the last parameter I'm trying to define as a the vararg concept here. Okay, so this is only we are discussing vararg concept here. This concept is going to take multiple parameters here. Okay, so this is the whatever the into three dots v, this the naming we are going to call it as a vararg here. The vararg basically it will try to hello multiple values. So for example, so these two, why these two not getting any error? So why this particular VA test, the line number 16 is getting an error? Any idea? The two methods is not getting any error, but the last method it is getting an error here. Okay, so what we need to understand basically here, this is the first parameter we are passing. Okay, and the second parameter is expecting int value. We are not passing the int value. Okay, basically this vararg related information, if you are providing 0, it will allow. But this is the mandatory parameter. Getting the point? This is the mandatory parameter we are using here. The mandatory parameter basically we are not providing here. This is important here. But here also we are not providing the mandatory parameter. But how it is considering is. Getting the point? So earlier the 4 parameter we used for the vararg concept here. But right now also we are using vararg concept. We are not modifying here. But why these two methods are not giving me an error? Why this method is giving me an error? Basically, after this string parameter, whatever the next value we are going to get. Okay, whatever the next value we are going to get, the next value it is going to treat it as a this particular value. Cutting the point. And after this, the remaining value it's moving into this particular vararg concept here. Okay, and here also same. These all the three will move to the vararg, and the 10 value will store as a value. Same way, the 12 will be stored as a value, and this remaining parameters will go to the vararg concept here. And here we don't have any information for this particular the required parameter. So now I'm trying to pass something required parameter 23. Now you can see it is not giving me any error here. Getting the point? This is very important here. Whenever you are trying to define the vararg concept here, it should be end of the it should be last parameter of the method. We cannot define the first parameter. If you are defining the first parameter, you are not going to write some additional parameters those are all the required parameters we are not going to write here. Okay, this is important we need to understand here. Now I'm going to run this example. Now you can see the 3 parameters. The first parameter is moved as a content like a value, the required parameter, and the remaining 3 parameters are moved to the vararg concept here. Same way, the 8 parameter, between the 8, the first parameter is trying to store as a value, and the remaining the 7 parameters are moved to the vararg concept here. Okay, the vararg parameter. Okay, now what you need to understand here, empty 0. So why we are getting 0 here? Because the length we are trying to print here, we are not passing any additional parameters. Those parameters not going to use as a VAR here. Okay, this is very important we need to understand here. Okay, so any questions? Any questions regarding the required parameter as well as optional parameters? Basically, vararg is the optional parameters. If you are not providing the parameters also, we are able to execute our applications. So any questions?
No, sir. It's clear.
సాయి చెప్పు. సో నీ క్వశ్చన్ ఏంటి అర్థం కాలేదు నాకు.
వాట్ టెస్ట్ అంటే మెథడ్ సార్?
ఇక్కడ డిఫైన్ చేసే కదా నిన్ననే మనం డిస్కస్ చేసాం కదా స్టాటిక్ వాయిడ్ విఏ టెస్ట్ అనే.
ఓకే.
సో విఏ టెస్ట్ అనేది మెథడ్ ఇక్కడ ఆబ్జెక్ట్ క్రియేట్ చేయకుండా డైరెక్ట్గా మనం మెథడ్ కాల్ చేస్తున్నాము. అండ్ ఇక్కడ మన మెథడ్ పారామీటర్లు ఇది సింపుల్. నేను అందుకే చెప్పాను ఎప్పుడైతే క్లాస్ ఇంట్రడక్షన్ నేను చెప్పానో సో ఇదే సేమ్ వేలో మనం డిస్కస్ చేస్తున్నాం. ఇప్పుడు చూస్తే ఇవే మెథడ్స్ బట్ ఓన్లీ ఇక్కడ రాసిన మెథడ్ పర్పస్ వేరు, ఇప్పుడు రాసిన మెథడ్ పర్పస్ డిఫరెంట్. ఇక్కడ రాసిన మెథడ్ ఏం చేస్తుంది, ఇక్కడ జస్ట్ మనం 3 మెథడ్స్ పారామీటర్స్ తీసుకున్నాము. ఒకటి మెసేజ్ అని ప్రింట్ చేస్తున్నాము, సెకండ్ వాల్యూ అని తీసుకున్నాము, ఇంకోటి ఆప్షనల్ పారామీటర్ vararg అని తీసుకుంటాం. ఇక్కడ ఇదేంటంటే బేసిక్గా మల్టిపుల్ వాల్యూస్ ఈ parameter is going to hold. Okay, so 0 like 1 to any number of parameters, so there is no restrictions here. But here we are having restriction, we can only pass one value. If you are trying to pass one more, it will not allow you. Same way here, this is the string data type, we are going to pass only this is the format here. If you are trying to change the format, we are going to get an error. ఓకే, ఇలా కండిషన్స్ లైక్ రిస్ట్రిక్షన్స్ ఉన్నాయి దీస్ పారామీటర్స్, ఈ 2 పారామీటర్లకి. బట్ ఈ పారామీటర్కి మాత్రం రిస్ట్రిక్షన్ అనేది ఏం లేదు. ఇక్కడ సింగిల్ వాల్యూ నుంచి మోర్ దెన్ సింగిల్ వాల్యూ లైక్ 100 వాల్యూస్ వరకు దిస్ పారామీటర్ హోల్డ్ చేస్తుంది. బట్ ఇక్కడ ఓన్లీ 1 వాల్యూని హోల్డ్ చేస్తుంది. ఇదే డిఫరెన్స్ ఇక్కడ. సో దిస్ ఇస్ ద కాన్సెప్ట్, విల్ కాల్ ఇట్ యాజ్ ఎ vararg. And yeah,
can we declare more vararg means int data v1 and string data v something like
so that is only explained, right? If I'm trying to provide so one more vararg concept, so see now you are getting something like s if I'm going to use. Now you can see we are getting an error here. ఒక మెథడ్ కి ఒకే vararg పారామీటర్స్ ఉంటుంది, అది ఏ డేటా టైప్ అయినా. ఓకేనా? అండ్ ద మెథడ్ ద vararg పారామీటర్ ఇట్ షుడ్ బి లాస్ట్. ఓకే సాయి, ఏమైనా క్వశ్చన్స్ ఉన్నాయా? Okay, now if we observe carefully, so this is the simple example we discuss here. Now what I'm trying to provide the more information on this vararg here, I'm going to write overloaded method. So this concept we already discussed. Now you can see this is the overload demo method, we like the class we defined here, and we are having multiple methods. So this is the first method, second method, third method, fourth method we defined here. And here what we are doing basically, we are trying to changing the parameters and the order parameter and type parameters. So this concept we already discussed. So this concept we'll call it as a overloading the methods here. Okay, now the same concept how we can overloading the vararg method here. Getting the point? So this is again I'm trying to write the one more method. Observe carefully here, I'm going to write the concept here. I'm not going to take any parameters here. So what we define here, something like, okay, I'm going to write number of args here. Let me remove this. Okay, so this is the initial example we discussed here. Now what I'm doing here, I'm going to copy and I'm going to define same method name, and instead of this particular int here, now what I'm doing here, I'm going to take boolean. Okay, so here we can modify boolean. So this is overloading vararg method here. And here, so you can write one more method. If you are interested, you can write one more method with additional parameters. So that is we discussed just now, something like string, message, and into this concept here. So getting the point? So this is we already identified these 3 methods. We'll call it as a overloading vararg method. So how we are calling, name of the method is same and only the parameters are different. Is expecting integer type, and here it is expecting boolean type, and here it is expecting string comma integer type here. Okay, now what you need to understand here, how we are going to pass this. This is very important here, how we are going to pass this particular example here. So I'm going to comment out this also. Okay, VA test we are defining it, and VA test I'm trying to providing multiple values. So this particular VA test, it is going to call as a our integer related information. And one more VA test method I'm calling here, and this particular Varargs test method is expecting string as a first parameter and some additional values. Okay, this is the one more method we are calling, and the last method here I'm trying to providing the boolean related values here. First one true, second one false, and the third one also I'm going to make as a false. Okay, fourth one I'm making as a true. Getting the point? This is the additional method we are calling. The data type we are passing as a boolean here. Okay, now we understand this. So this is whenever we are calling it directly, it's going to execute this example, and it will it returns the values here, whatever the number of content we are having and what are the values we are having, everything it is returning here. Okay, so now we understand this is the way of writing the overloading Varargs concept here. But if we observe how we are going to get ambiguity, this is important here. Now observe carefully. I'm not writing this. So here I'm going to keep. I'm not adding any parameters here. So empty parameters I'm passing here. So why I am getting this error? Any idea? So if you observe carefully, in the previous example, I removed the 23. So happily we executed the example. But same thing I'm trying to write here, the same VA test, empty parameters here. At the time this, why we are getting an error here? Getting the point? So this is very important here. Whenever we are writing the overloading Varargs method here we are not going to call empty the method. So why we are not able to call this empty method here? Getting the point? Because if we observe carefully here, how many methods we define here? 3 methods we define. So first one is expecting integer, second one is expecting boolean, and the third one is expecting string comma integer here. Okay, but if we observe carefully here, these two are the important ones. These two are the important ones here. So basically here what we are doing here, because here we define the single parameter as a Varargs, and here also we define the single parameter. But what happens internally, whenever we are not providing the empty, like whenever we are providing this particular empty parameters here, compiler will get ambiguity. So which method I want to call? Either I want to call boolean or I want to call this particular integer one. Getting the word? So either I want to call this particular boolean or I want to call this particular integer related concepts. So because of this, whenever you are trying to defining overloading Varargs concept here, this is important here. You cannot call empty method. You cannot call this particular empty method, because if you are providing some values, for example, if I'm going to provide true, compiler it will call the boolean related method, or if you provide the 10 here, compiler will call the integer related. But whenever I'm not providing this particular parameters here, compiler will get a dynamo. So which method? Because if you are providing the parameter, automatically compiler will get to know. So the values are having which data type here. Based on that, it will call. But whenever we are not providing this, compiler will get the dynamo. So this is very important here. But we cannot call the empty whenever we are trying to overloading the Varargs concept here. Okay. So is it clear? Any questions?
Sir, can we create a empty method for empty?
You can create, right? Because here, if you see,
That time it
if,
calls, no?
so okay. Now observe. I'm going to copy this method, and here I'm not going to add any parameters. So if I'm not adding, this will be empty. I'm going to comment out this section. Now you can see This is the VA test. But this section this method will call as a normal method. It is not the Varargs concept here. Okay, so if I want to print this, now you can see, we'll see whether this message will come or not. Now you can see normal VA test method. So now what you understand here, without the parameter, it is calling this. So basically, only the problem here, if you are not having this method, so sorry, whenever we are not having this method, compiler will get a dynamo which method I want to call here. But if you provide this, this is not the Varargs method. It is a simple method. So even though we are overloading, but this is the normal method we are overloading here. So this concept we'll call it as a Varargs overloading, and just we are declaring the one method. So this method is not going to take any parameters here. Okay, it's clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions?
సార్ లాంగ్ యూజ్ చేసుకోవచ్చు సార్.
ఏ డేటా టైప్ అని యూజ్ చేసుకోవచ్చు ఇక్కడ, నాట్ ఓన్లీ ఇంట్. సో ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ నేను ఈ మెథడ్ కాపీ చేశాను. సో లాంగ్ కాదు, ఇంకా ఏ డేటా టైప్ అయినా, ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ సో లాంగ్ డిఫైన్ చేశాను. ఓకే, ఇక్కడ ఇది డేటా టైప్ మోడిఫై చేయాలి. సో నౌ యూ కెన్ సీ ఎర్రర్స్ ఏం లేవు ఇక్కడ. సో కంపైలర్ హ్యాపీలీ ఈస్ కంపైల్ అవర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ హియర్. Okay, so instead of this particular long, now we can go for the box also. We already discussed about this particular box example. Now you can convert to this box also. Okay, primitive type data type kaakunda custom data type also we can use. Okay, so here data type is not important here, but how we are defining these parameters is important here. Any data type here. Now, so box we are like a box create chesamu. సో దాని తర్వాత రైట్ నౌ ఓకే మచ్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్. సో రికర్షన్ అని ఒక ఎగ్జాంపుల్ క్రియేట్ చేసాము. రికర్షన్ ఆల్సో వీ కెన్ పాస్ పర్సన్, మెంబర్, ఓకే, అలర్ట్, సో ప్లాన్, మోడల్, ఎనీ క్లాస్ ఏవైతే క్లాసులు యూజ్ చేస్తామో, అంటే బేస్డ్ ఆన్ అవర్ అప్లికేషన్స్ ఇన్ రియల్ టైమ్ అప్లికేషన్ ఎలాంటి మోడల్ క్లాస్ అయితే మనం క్రియేట్ చేస్తామో అన్ని మోడల్ క్లాసెస్ ఆర్ ఎలిజిబుల్ ఇయర్. ఓకే, ఇంకేమైనా క్వశ్చన్సా?
ఒకవేళ లాంగ్ రాసుకుంటే ల్యాక్స్ లో రాసుకోవాలి కదా సార్ కింద.
సో మనం డిఫైన్ చేసాం కదా.
ఎస్ సార్.
సో సేమ్ అదే ద టైప్ ఇంపార్టెంట్ గా. ఎప్పుడైతే నువ్వు లాంగ్ డిఫైన్ చేసావో ఆ వాల్యూని కరెక్ట్గా డిఫైన్ చేయాలి. సో లాంగ్ ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ ఇక నేను లాంగ్ పెట్టాను అనుకుంటాను. లాంగ్ ఈజ్ ద హైయెస్ట్ డేటా టైప్. మోస్ట్ ఆఫ్ ద కేసెస్ వీఆర్ నాట్ గోయింగ్ టు యూజ్ ఇట్ బికాస్ ద లాంగ్ ఈ డేటా టైప్ అనేది బిగ్ వాల్యూని స్టోర్ చేస్తుంది. మనకు అంత పెద్ద బిగ్ వాల్యూ మనకి డిస్కస్ చేయం కాబట్టి లాంగ్ ఈజ్ నాట్ ద కరెక్ట్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ హియర్. బట్ లాంగ్ ఆల్సో నెంబర్ డేటా టైప్, అంటే నెంబర్ వాల్యూస్ని హోల్డ్ చేస్తుంది. ఇంటీజర్ వాల్యూస్ ఎలా అయితే మనం స్టోర్ చేస్తున్నావో నెంబర్ వాల్యూస్ని మనం స్టోర్ చేయొచ్చు. ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ 45, 78, 96 సంథింగ్ 85. అండ్ ఇప్పుడు ఇక్కడ ఐడెంటిఫై చేయాల్సింది ఏంటంటే ఇంట్ డేటా టైప్ని కాల్ చేస్తుంది ఇక్కడ. సో first I will make as a L here. Now ఇది లాంగ్ ఇక్కడ డిఫైన్ చేసాం కదా, నెంబర్ ఆఫ్ లాంగ్ ఆర్గ్యుమెంట్స్ అని నేను డిఫైన్ చేసా జస్ట్ ఐడెంటిఫికేషన్ పర్పస్. సో ఇక్కడ చూస్తే నెంబర్ ఆఫ్ లాగ్ పారామీటర్స్ మనం ఏమైతే పాస్ చేసామో 95, 78, 96, 85. Sorry, 45, 78, 96, 85. ఓకే, సో లాస్ట్ మెథడ్ లాంగ్ రిలేటెడ్ మెథడ్ మనం డిఫైన్ చేసాము అండ్ ద లాంగ్ మెథడ్ కాల్ అయింది. ఇప్పుడు చూస్తే నేను ఈ లాంగ్ ఎల్ అనే ద లాస్ట్ క్యారెక్టర్ నేను రిమూవ్ చేసేసాను. ఓకే, ఇప్పుడు నువ్వు ఐడెంటిఫై చేస్తే ఏ మెథడ్ కాల్ అవుతుంది? సో ఇక్కడ లాంగ్ మెథడ్ కాల్ అవ్వలేదు. కడింగ్ ద పాయింట్. ఇక్కడ ఏదైతే లాంగ్ మెథడ్ మనం డిఫైన్ చేసామో ఇక్కడ ఈ లాంగ్ మెథడ్ మనం డిఫైన్ చేసామో ఈ మెసేజ్ చూస్తే ఈ మెసేజ్ ప్రింట్ అవ్వలేదు. నెంబర్ ఆఫ్ లాంగ్ ఆర్గ్యుమెంట్స్ హియర్. సో ఇక్కడ చూస్తే నెంబర్ ఆఫ్ ఆర్గ్యుమెంట్స్ ప్రింట్ అయిన తప్ప లాంగ్ ఆర్గ్యుమెంట్స్ ప్రింట్ అవ్వాలి. అంటే హైయెస్ట్ ప్రయారిటీ ఈ మెథడ్ తీసుకుంటుంది. ఇక్కడ నువ్వు లాంగ్ అని నువ్వు డిఫైన్ చేసినా కూడా ఎప్పుడైతే వాల్యూ ఇచ్చేటప్పుడు ఎల్ అపెండ్ చేయకపోతే ఇట్ విల్ గో టు దిస్ ఇంట్ మెథడ్. అర్థమవుతుందా? ఎందుకంటే బై డిఫాల్ట్గా జావా కంపైలర్ ఏం చేస్తుంది అంటే ఇంట్ రిలేటెడ్ డేటా టైప్నే హైయెస్ట్ ప్రిఫర్ చేస్తుంది. ఓకే, ఇప్పుడు లాంగ్ ప్రొవైడ్ చేసావంటే ఆటోమేటిక్గా లాంగ్కి వెళ్ళిపోతుంది. నా ఇంకోటి ఏంటంటే బైట్ ప్రొవైడ్ చేస్తే బయటకి వెళ్ళిపోతుంది. కానీ ఏమి ప్రొవైడ్ చేయకపోతే డిఫాల్ట్గా ఈ ఇంటీజర్ మెథడ్ కాల్ అవుతుంది. ఓకే, సో ఇంకేమైనా క్వశ్చన్స్ ఉన్నాయా? Okay. Krishna, basically, here we are passing the testing. But if you observe carefully, this message I'm not using anywhere. So, for example, here we can use this number of arguments, and here I will add a message. Okay. Observe carefully. Here I'm adding the message. Now you will see the testing information. So you can see testing number of arguments and 10,20. So 10,20 we provided here and testing. But earlier what I did here, so this message we are using, this message we declared this parameter, but I did not use this print statement. So because of that, the number, like whatever the message we added, it is not printed here. So is it clear? Any questions?
No, sir.
Okay, so this is the one of the important concept we are discussing, something like Varargs concept here. And so what we need to understand, the another example basically, this is also one of the important example. But before going to discuss this particular inheritance concepts here, I want to provide one example, command line arguments here. How we can pass values from command line arguments here. Getting the point? This is important example we are going to discuss here. So to understand this particular command line arguments here, now what I will do, I will go to the, let me change to the screen. So here we are having core Java and this example I am trying to discuss in the Notepad++, because in the IDE we cannot go for this particular command line information. So for this purpose I am trying to use Notepad++. So observe carefully the simple example I am trying to define here. So I'm converting Java and I'm trying to define one class here, something like command line. This is also important here, how we can pass the values from the command line here. Okay, the name of the class I'm defining as a command line, and here I'm trying to define public static void main. Okay, so whenever we are defining this particular public static void main, now later what I'm doing is I'm trying to pass arguments here. This is the main method. Now later what I'm doing is I'm trying to use this particular loop here. So here int I is equals to 0. Okay, and here the condition I'm making args dot length here. So length is a variable. So we discussed in the yesterday class here. Length I'm defining, and after this I++ I'm defining. And after this, now what I'm doing here, system dot out dot println I'm trying to use. So here I'm going to print this particular arguments here. So observe carefully. Along with this particular args here, now I'm going to provide one curly brace, and this particular curly brace will try to store the values here. And here I'm going to add I value. Here I'm going to add I value, and here I'm going to close this particular curly brace. Okay, so later what I'm doing here? Later here what I'm doing is I'm trying to append with this section here. Args we are getting args of I. Okay, so this is the print statement I'm using, and now observe carefully. This is very important because it is a simple example, but it will try to give you the more information about the command line here. Now what I'm doing is I'm trying to save this example. So inside this particular core Java folder, okay, command line is already available. Okay, let me cancel this. We'll go to the command line 2 because the command line is already available here. Now I'm trying to save with the command line 2. Okay, name of the class I modified here. But now what we need to understand here, this is very important. We need to understand here. Observe carefully. I'm moving into command line. So this is the command line example we are discussing. Java C command line 2 dot Java. Now I'm trying to compile. This example we already discussed in the initial stages, how we can compile the example, how we can run this example. Now I'm compile this example. I'm trying to run this example basically. So if you see, if we observe carefully, we are not getting any information. So why we are not getting any information? Because if we observe carefully, here we define the print statement here. Here we define this particular print statement, but why this particular print statement is not printing? Any idea why this particular print statement is not printed here? So why it is not printed here? Okay, what we need to understand basically here, this loop we need to understand here. Okay, and what is the condition? Because this is we already discussed here, initialization, condition, and iteration statement we define. And what is the condition here? Args.length. So what is the args basically? So this is the parameter here, and it is a type of array type. Basically it is expecting array type values. Now what we are doing basically, this condition is failing here. So if you observe carefully, this condition is failed. Because of this particular condition fail, the loop is not enter into the line number 4. The whatever the loop we defined here, the loop is not enter into the line number 4. It is coming out of the for loop here. Okay. So why it is coming out of this particular loop? Because of this particular condition. So whatever the condition we are providing, the condition is not satisfied. Okay. So what is the best way of providing the values to satisfy this particular condition? So now observe carefully. Here only I'm trying to providing the value. Observe. So this section we are discussing as a compiling our Java program, and this section will give you the running our Java program here. First we need to compile, and later we need to run our Java program. Okay. So now observe carefully. Whenever I'm trying to run this particular Java program, I'm going to provide some additional information. So what is the information I'm providing here? I'm giving the space after this particular space. So this is the test, and I'm going to provide 100 minus 1. Getting the point? Now if we observe, these many values I provided after this particular command line 2. Command line 2 is our class name. Okay, so this is the keyword we are going to use to execute our program here. Okay, and after this I'm trying to provide some message here. So based on this particular message, what happens internally? So what it will do, wherever we are using the space here, wherever we are trying to use this particular space, what happens internally, it will try to convert into the array type here. It will try to convert these values into the array type. Now you can see all the values we are getting. So this is the 0 index location, which string is stored here, this, and in the first index location is, second index location A, third index location is test, fourth index location 100, and the fifth index location, it is stored as a -1. How it is stored in this particular location? Because in between what we provided is space we given. Whenever we are trying to give the space, what happens internally? So before, whenever we are getting the space, it will try to split into the multiple values. So these values are split into the like this here. Because if I am giving this particular space, it's split into this particular spaces. So for example, now what I'm doing here, I'm not adding any space here. So this is test 100 -1. Now you can see only in the 0 index location. So observe the output. Earlier output is this and current output is this. Now what you understand basically, if I'm not adding the space, it is treating as a one string. The entire string is stored into this particular 0 index location. And whenever I'm trying to give the space between the each string here, it is splitted into this particular values here. Okay, but now what you understand is these values, the input basically I'm trying to give from the command line. Getting the pen? Whatever the input I'm giving it, the input I'm trying to store, I'm trying to give from the command line. So this example very important, we need to understand here. This is the way of providing the values from the command line. Okay, any questions?
No, sir. It's clear.
Okay, साई ने क्या क्वेश्चन सुना? Okay, so observe carefully. Yes, so basically why we have to give the input here. Here if you observe carefully, this is the arguments. So this is the reference variable, like it is a variable we declare to this particular main method. Now here what we need to understand. So this is the data type here. That why we need to provide the data type here. We are giving the compiler, we are going to pass the parameter, that data type called string. Okay, the main method is expecting one parameter that is called string. This is the data type and the values is going to store into this particular args. Values will be stored into this particular args, but this value contain the data type like this. Okay, so this, the values are having string data. We cannot provide the numbers. But if we observe carefully, here we have provided the numbers here. Something like 100 minus. This is the numbers here. But what happens internally? These numbers are converted into string type here, not the integer long double. Whatever the data type we so far we learn here, the values are not converting into the integer or long. But whatever the 100 and -1 we provided here, these values are going to store into this particular string format here. Okay, so internally it's going to take care of the conversion logic by our compiler. Now what you need to understand, this is the data type we provided and actual values are like original values are going to store into this particular arguments here. Now here what I'm doing is, here I'm trying to use args dot. Why I'm using? Because it is an array here. So in the previous example, already we discussed here how the values are going to store arrays. How the values are going to store here. So this is the format here. Like it's going to store 0, 1, second, and third, and something like 4. Move on here. Okay. So this is the way the values are going to store. But here, what is the size? What is the size? Because when we are trying to discuss about the arrays concept here, first we need to define the size. But who is going to create the size here? Who is going to create the size? The size basically here is going to create based on our input here. So how many inputs we are giving here? This is important here. Based on inputs here, the size is going to create it. For example, the first example, it is created 0 to 5. It is nothing but size is 6 because size is going to start from the 1 and indexes are going to start with the 0. This is important here. Okay. Now you can see by seeing this particular indexes, we can easily understand the size is 6 here. But what about this another example? Size is 1. Why the size is 1 we given? Because we given only one string here. And in the previous example, we given around 6 values. All the values are having data type called string. So this is the size here. Now, whenever the main method is called, This values contain the 6 elements here, and I'm trying to repeating the loop here. This particular loop is going to repeat around 6 times, and each time the values are printing like this. Okay, if I'm not giving this particular values, what happening internally? First, the condition is not going to satisfy. Anyway, if the condition will satisfy, internally we'll get an error. We'll get an error here. Okay, so this is we need to understand very carefully here. So this is again here also we are providing the dynamic values. For example, observe carefully. Instead of this particular length here, if I'm going to give as a 10, if I'm going to give as a 10 here, now we'll compile the same example one more time. We need to compile, because if we modify something, we need to compile here. Okay, now I'm running. Now you can see we are getting an exception here. We are getting an exception. Now you can read exception in thread called main, and what is the name of the exception? Array index out of bound exception. So index is 0 and out for the length called 0. Okay, the length we are having right now 0, but what we are doing here, using this particular 0, we are trying to load the element here. So where we are trying to load? Command line 2.java line number 4. So this is the line number 4. This is the line number 4. We are trying to load the elements here, but right now we don't have any elements here. So how this particular values are going to load here? If you are not inserting the value into this particular string array, how we are going to load the values? Getting the point? This is very important. But here, what is the condition we are making? It's a static value. It's a static value. The value is a 10. The 10 times this particular loop is going to repeat. But if I'm going to modify this, now observe carefully. The condition is going to check based on this particular length here. Length, if you are inserting the value, it will become return the appropriate value. Otherwise, the length will become 0. The length will become 0. If it is 0, this condition will return false. It will not come into the line number 4. It will come out of the line number 4. So whenever we are making this particular condition, we will not get this particular exception. We will not get this particular exception. How many values we are going to have? The same value the loop is going to repeat. For example, we provided as a 100 values. 100 times only the loop is going to repeat. It will not repeat more than 100 times or less than 100 times. Getting the point? So this is because of this particular condition here. Okay. So any questions? How we are passing the input values, and how we are checking the condition, and how we are printing the values here? Because this is we are discussing from multiple example. The array related example we discussed lot of example here. So again, no need to no need to explain how this particular values are going to load here.
Sir, why we not to run this program in Eclipse Ide?
Basically, in the Eclipse, there is no option to provide the command line here. So we can have some additional tools here that the tools is not working the efficient way. So that's the reason I'm running this example from the command line.
Okay.
Okay. So this particular example we'll get whenever we are discussing the Spring Boot. So there I will provide the much information how we are going to pass the command line values here. Okay, just for understanding why they given
Hello, sir, we are not getting your voice.
Okay. So anyone having any questions so regarding this command line example? If not, so evening we are going to discuss one of the important concept to call inheritance here. Okay. So here up to now we discuss about the encapsulation and we discuss about the polymorphism. So the polymorphism we are going to discuss one more important concept to call overriding the concepts here. But the concept we are going to discuss once we familiar with the inheritance here. Okay. So inheritance once we completed the inheritance here, the most of the basic stuff we completed here. Okay. So we'll continue evening at same time what we discussed in the yesterday.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So we'll continue today evening.